Hello, U.S. History students. Mrs. Pascogan here. Today, I would like you to just take a look at this picture here. How would you like to live there? How many of you would like to live in a house made of dirt? Because that's what that is. It's called a sod house, and that's what many Americans lived in, who were called sod busters or homesteaders. So we're talking all about settling the West. Well, there was something called the Homestead Act in 1862 that President Lincoln passed. This was during the Civil War. But he passed this to help settle the West and to get farmers out there. There was all this land in the Great Plains, the prairies, to settle and to farm. And to encourage people to go out, they were giving away 160 acres basically for free. There was a small like $30 fee, but free land. Imagine that, 160 acres for free, but there were some requirements. You had to, within 6 months of staking your claim, you had to build a house, and you had to live there for 5 years and improve the land. So many people said, hey, you know what? We're gonna take this offering and run with it. So these people were called the homesteaders, and boy, did they have to be tough to survive out there. So look at this family here. This picture is colorized after the fact. It would have been taken in black and white. But just take a look at that house. So they had to make this out of sod, which is just the dirt and the grass, the top layer of the soil. And they would cut it into the shape of bricks, and they would stack it upon each other to make a house. Because the prairies were so flat, it wasn't like there were trees to cut down for wood and houses. So this is pretty much, the best they could do with limited resources, and they had to get something up fast. And something else I want to tell you about these farmers that settled the West was that, they faced many, many challenges. It wasn't what they were used to living out east. Summers brought really, intense heat. They said that the surface temperature could exceed 120 degrees. There would be periods of drought, rainstorms, tornadoes, swarms of grasshoppers that could destroy fields of crops, and never-ending wind also challenged settlers. Then the winters. The winters could be brutal. Winters were long and cold. Blizzards were so strong that they could trap livestock and homesteaders under the snow. During the long winter of 1886, horses and cattle died when their breasts froze over the ends of their noses, making it impossible for them to breathe. Building a home and establishing a farm was a challenge for even the most experienced farmers, but the free land, abundant wildlife, and richness of the soil made the challenge hard to resist. So, these people, are pretty brave and I would say hardy, right? I mean, these people are willing to withstand all of that, what I just talked about, the elements, to make a go at this of their, dream, the American dream. Okay, so, and then one other thing I wanted to tell you, I used to, in my brick and mortar classroom, I used to put tape on the floor, and I would have students get in to see just how tiny these houses were. A lot of them were just 10 by 12 foot houses. Typical ones were about 16 feet by 20 feet. They only had one room. So imagine your family living in a one-room house. So you don't have your own bedroom. So imagine maybe what your bedroom is right now, your whole family living in. Furniture was kept to a minimum due to the lack of space. Beds and tables were often built right into the walls. Many people slept on wooden pallets that could be moved out of the way during the day, or they had like a feather type mattress that they slept on the floor. And you would have dirt floors too. One of the first things that people, especially the wives, would want to do would be to get wooden floors in these dirt houses, these sod houses. That would be a big luxury. Windows were hard to come by too. That was rare. But many people slept on wooden pallets that could be moved out of the way during the day. Crowded conditions meant that some household objects, like sewing machines, were kept outside when the weather was good and had to be squeezed inside when it rained or snowed. So, there would be dirt in these houses. There would be snakes would get in, mice. I mean, think about it. You're living in a dirt house. But surprisingly, they did keep you pretty cool in the summer and warm and cozy in the winter. So, and there was one other thing I wanted to mention to you. Oh, sometimes during these brutal winters, they would have to bring some of the animals and livestock in. So could you imagine your whole family, and your animals, your livestock, some chickens, and maybe you have to bring in your cow. You're all in this little tiny sod house. So these are the people that settled the West. Here's another picture of one. This one looks a little bit nicer, this house, right? But again, that's another sod house. So eventually, once these people, hopefully their dream, I would imagine, would be to get into, once they got more established, would be to build maybe a house out of wood, or maybe even brick if you really made it big, because that would be really expensive, but that would be the goal. But this is how a lot of them had to start out. And it was hard. It was really hard to make it out west on the plains. And, many kids would die. Women would lose their babies in childbirth or could die during childbirth. This was a different era. It's not like today with modern medicine. So these people had to have grit to make it out there. Okay, so you're going to learn more about this in this lesson. And in particular, I'm focusing on the women homesteaders. I call it women homesteaders. So homesteaders are the ones that took advantage of this Homestead Act of getting this free land out west. And the reason I'm focusing on women is because if you look in the summit, your next checkpoint, you're learning all about the impact, the intent and impact of westward expansion. You're learning about, you learned about African Americans, and a lot of them were cowboys. You learned about cowboys. You learned about Native Americans, the Trail of Tears. You learned about the immigrants, like the Chinese and the Chinese Exclusion Act. And now you're looking at the impact of westward expansion on women. So women played a major role in the settling of the West. So in your summit lesson, you're going to do a document set, which is pretty typical. You typically do that, right? You're looking at how it impacted women. You're going to look at the social impacts, political and economic. And they have some really good resources in here. So I want you, if you click this, you're going to read about people like, do you ever hear of Annie Oakley? Some famous, what's her name? The other one, but there were some famous women that were sharpshooters and were in the Wild West show. What's her name? Well, there's one more that I really want. Oh, there we go. Calamity Jane. Did you ever hear of her? She was a really good sharpshooter. So anyways, you're going to look in these lessons about all these different women and their roles that they played in the West. Okay, so you're going to look through those documents, and there's a graphic organizer to complete. And this is the same thing you've been doing each time. You're leading up to the big question of how does the intent of westward expansion compare to the impacts it had on different groups of people. This one, though, in particular, you're just looking at how did westward expansion impact women. So in those documents, these documents here that you're reading, you're going to select evidence and then how this evidence is related to this supporting question here about the impact on women. All right, and then you can go through here and answer all these questions with the main goal in mind of submitting this checkpoint here. Okay, and this all relates to women here. And you're going to compare and contrast the impact of westward expansion on women, blacks, American Indians, and immigrants. So it just keeps getting bigger and bigger from the last time. So what are the similarities and differences on their experiences of women, blacks, American Indians, and immigrants in terms of westward expansion? And then here, this is the part I'm interested in here, is it says compare and contrast the intent of westward expansion with the impact it had on women. So through my lesson I'm giving you and the document sets, I want to know, here what you have to say about this. So compare and contrast the intent of westward expansion. So what was the idea? What was the intention for this whole idea to expand the West for women? And then what was the real impact it had on them? So that's what you're doing this week for the summit lesson. And then for my lesson, I'm just trying to help you out a little more with it. So I'm touching on these women homesteaders, the farmers. So I have something that I really want you to, hang on. So I'm focusing on, like, as I said, on these homesteaders. And this is something that I had my students read at my previous school that I absolutely love. We would read this together. And it's a real true story. You're going to read about a woman by the name of Mary Chaffee Abell, and she lived in Kansas, and she moved there from the East Coast. And I'm going to show you where you're going to find that. You're just going to scroll down here. You're not reading number 1, you're reading number 2. Mary Chaffee Abell confronts the Kansas environment. And you'll see here, these are letters that she's writing to her family members. So this first one, this is true. This is from this woman. This is called a primary source, in her own words. So this is 1871. She's writing this letter to her sister, and she talks, well, I'll let you do the reading here, but talks about her life and what she has to go through and the hardships that she endures. And I want you to pay close attention here. I always would point this out to my students on this paragraph right here, that she is pregnant and she's battling a wildfire with her husband, and she gets badly burned on the right side of her face. Her right side of her face is raw. One of her eyes is half shut, and she's pregnant. So I just want you to think about, women and what you think of women and what their role was supposed to be, in the home as a housewife, and think of, what these wives are doing, these women are doing out on the plains here, in these farms. So I really want you to read that closely. And as you read, think about the hardship she endures. Then I want you to watch this video again about women homesteaders. And most of them came in a family or they were married, but there were some, I stumbled upon this, that were independent women who staked their own claim. So that was very interesting. So read that. Then I want you to do these flashcards. You will answer this question here. Take a little quiz, and then you are going to use the information in this lesson along with the documents in Summit to complete your checkpoint on women, okay? And then you go ahead and answer your reflection here. So you'll be working on this week. We have a short week, just Monday and Tuesday. You're off Wednesday, Thursday, Friday for Thanksgiving, so happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy your break, and then you can continue working on this lesson and the checkpoint lesson also next week. Okay, so this will go into, it's kind of give you a week and a half or a week and 2 days to work on this. All right, and then just in case you're wondering where we're going after this, then we're going to do a compare and contrast. You're going to do a rough draft. You're going to be working on your writing, and you're working toward that PSA that I'll get at more detail to you when we get closer to that. But that's where we're headed. So you can see there's still quite a few checkpoints left, and then you have the 3 final products. All right, if you have any questions or concerns, you know where to find me. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving.